Hey, this is Mark Johnson, and I'm on a cruise ship headed back to LA on Friday, and we had to record our sermon. I'm not going to be able to get it uploaded until probably Saturday morning, but I just wanted to kind of set the scene in case you see a little rocky movement. That's not your imagination. It's not the guy holding the camera. It's actually we're in the Pacific Ocean headed back to the harbor. So we'll be in the morning, and I'll try to upload this as quickly as possible. So my wife is with me, and I'm going to be preaching this message to her. The audience is actually designed for my young people, or young people who are more millennial age, and I'm trying to get them to learn about God. So I'm going to get started. Thanks for joining with me today, Sister Johnson. Glad you're here. I'm going to read from Genesis 18 and 25. The Net Bible reads it this way: "Far be it from your doing something like this, to put to death the righteous with the wicked, to treat the righteous and the wicked the same. Far be it from you, shall not the judge of all the earth act justly?" So I'd like to preach on the question, what is fair, or is God fair? Do you relate equal treatment as fair? So I have a question. Is God truly fair? It's a fundamental question I've been asked in a variety of ways over many years of ministry. It's couched in different terms, but often it's asked through the lens of a difficulty. Why did God give me cancer? Why did my baby die? Why me? Why am I facing this difficulty? Is God fair to me right now? Is God picking on me, or did God pick me out for suffering? The formation of the question is based on a fundamental question that most people won't ask, but I think is the most important question. Is God fair? It's not a unique question. Abraham asked a version of this question in our scriptural reference. Does God punish the righteous arbitrarily with the wicked? Does a righteous man and a wicked man receive the same judgment? Is God unfair? The context of this question is a conversation between Abraham, who's viewed as the father of both Jews and most Arabs, and a certain father reverenced by the faith of Muslims, Jews, and Christians. The Bible views his relationship with God as a man chosen by God to place his name and be a blessing to the whole earth. He was chosen out of Ur of the Chaldees and told, if you'll come and follow me, I'm going to give you a land that flows with milk and honey. God's goal for picking Abraham was to reflect that relationship, or through that relationship with Abraham, the kind of relationship he wanted to have with the whole earth. The setting of the conversation is the angel of the Lord has stopped by on the way to view the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah and decide if judgment for sin is necessary due to the wickedness of those two cities. So it's a complicated setting that we have, that God is coming by Abraham's house on the way to view Sodom and Gomorrah and decide whether to judge them or not. And obviously Abraham has the understanding that Sodom and Gomorrah has great wickedness. It's probably rumored throughout the land what goes on in Sodom and Gomorrah, and so he knows most likely God's judgment. So he has a conversation with God about whether that's the right thing to do, and how right will God be. Sometimes people ask God the question, or about God the question, does God have the right to be the judge of sin? Or who gave God the right to judge sin? Or does God judge fairly? I'm often questioned by the fairness or the rightness of God. Is there injustice with God? Paul says. He wrote in Romans chapter 9, what shall we say then? Is there injustice with God? Absolutely not. And then Paul quotes Moses. He says to Moses, I will have mercy on whom I will have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion. So Paul quoted Exodus 33:19, which was God placing Moses in the cleft of the rock to allow God's glory to pass in front of Moses, with the hand of God over the cleft to protect Moses from God's glory. And in that position, God's telling Abraham, or telling Moses, that he can choose to bless someone or not bless someone. And it's his prerogative or right as creator to do that. So Abraham is having a direct conversation with God, or a theophany, a God in angelic form, a physical representation of God. It is interesting to note, only a few men did God appear that way to in the Old Testament. In that way, God appeared to Hagar, to Abraham, and to Lot, to Jacob, to Moses, to Balaam, to Joshua, to Gideon, to Manoah and his wife, to David. That God or angels appear to mankind and talks with them is reflected in a variety of faiths besides Christianity and the Jewish faith. And we base ours on these Old Testament examples, but some other faiths believe in a relationship with God that is impacted or directed through angels. So this direct relationship, though, with Abraham and God allowed Abraham to build trust in God's character. If you know the character of God, then you know the actions of God, for your actions flow out of your character or out of your nature. Pilate, in judging Jesus, revealed his lack of deep character, for he allowed the political pressure of the Jewish leaders to sway his judgment against Jesus, who was a righteous man. He made an unrighteous judgment because of an unrighteous heart. In his private discussion with Jesus, Pilate seemed to ignore the idea of truth having value. John 18 records it this way. Pilate said, "So you are a king." Jesus replied, "You say that I'm a king. For this reason I was born, and for this reason I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice." Pilate responded, "What's truth?" Pilate weighed very lightly the value of truth. Political expediency was much heavier than truth to Pilate, and he caved into the pressure of the moment and judged Jesus unfairly. So that judgment was a reflection of Pilate's character. But Jesus knew the value of truth and righteousness winning over all. In fact, Jesus earlier defined himself as truth when he said, "I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you have known me, you would have known my Father too. And from now on, you do know him and have seen him." So Jesus is not only defining himself as truth, but he's defining himself as the Father. And knowing Jesus means you know the Father, which is the God of the Old Testament. The Jehovah, God with us, is who Jesus was. So he was connecting himself to that God that Abraham had that conversation with and that Abraham trusted in. Jesus did not define himself as knowing truth, but that he was truth. If you look in the dictionary for the definition of truth, you should be able to find a picture of Jesus according to Jesus, for he defined truth. Jesus then defined himself with the Heavenly Father. He said that God that Abraham trusted was God that walked before them in flesh. That right or righteous deity of Abraham is that right or righteous deity who walked on the earth. So Pilate, though, did not know the character of Jesus, so he thought it best to save his own skin rather than the unknown Jesus. And there's the crux of the conversation is, do you know him? The problem with many who judge God as capricious or unfair is they judge from ignorance. They judge from a lack of knowledge, a lack of understanding. They don't know God. They don't know his character. They don't know his personhood. They don't know his features. They don't know how he'll respond in situations. It's pretty interesting that Abraham knew God well enough that he was not questioning God, but he was making a confirming statement about God. Will the judge of all the earth do right? Jesus had a solution for those, though, that are ignorant of his character. He said, "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. For I am gentle and humble in heart. You'll find rest in your souls." As a teacher of humanity, he asked that his followers wear the yoke of their instructor. Yoke is that wooden barb that bound an ox to a cart or a plow, transferring the strength to the work that is directed by the plowman or the cart driver. So the ox's strength was tied in and used and useful by that ox bow that he wore. He loses his independence, but he gains the benefit of serving many others besides himself. He feeds many families besides himself, but he also is fed and cared for by his owner. Jesus suggested that you wear that yoke that he would put on, for it would bring peace to you. Many, especially young people, buck against the idea of God yoking them, viewing it as burdensome and heavy. But Jesus said his burden is light. You can almost hear Paul cry out as he longs for a deeper knowledge of Jesus Christ when he said, "My aim is to know him, to experience the power of his resurrection, and share in his suffering, to be like him in his death, and to somehow to attain the resurrection of the dead," in Philippians chapter 3. So Paul was saying, I want to know the Lord. I want to know who he is. And that's the real sermon today. That's the real idea today, is not just judging whether God is fair or right or righteous, because God is fair, God is right, God is righteous. But you need to know him so you can know that. God wants us to know him. He said to Israel in 2 Chronicles, "If my people which are called by my name shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face." There's the key term for the Abrahamic lesson today, is Abraham had sought the face of God. He had built altars. He had spent time in conversation with God and in trusting God and seeing the truthfulness, the righteousness of God. And so therefore he had a trust in God. So if you follow Jesus, you can learn of him. You can learn about the personality of God. You can learn of his character. You can learn of his mercy. You can learn how gracious he is. You can learn how much he loves you. You can learn how he wants to lead you. You can learn that he's a good shepherd and who cares for his sheep. You can take his yoke upon yourself. You can know his power. You can know his suffering. You can know his long suffering. You can know his peace, and you can learn to make peace. So is God fair? I want you to know, yes, absolutely. When you find God and when you begin to know God, the more you know about God, the fairer and truer he is. Much like the parable of the four blind men trying to understand what an elephant is, each touching a different part. You may be able to only know what you can feel in front of you, but as you move through life, you'll move through different parts of God and understand more and more and more. The more you feel, the more you touch, the more you seek, and you'll know God. So I'm calling you today to know the Lord. Not in just a salvation way, but to deeply know the character and nature of God. Find out who God is. Read his word. Spend time in prayer. Come to church. Respond at an altar. Amen. Let God show himself to you. If you'll seek his face, he promises that he will be found by you.